welcome to another episode of The Empowered Badass with me, Ophelia, your favorite aerial coach. If you don't know me, I've got over 30 years of experience in the circus industry and over a decade of experience as a coach. So what I bring today will be a little bit discussing of nutrition, but because I don't want to just dive too much into nutrition, we are going to discuss what kind of energy system we use in aerial training and how you can optimize your performance, not just by timing, but also understanding what to eat and when to eat it. All right. When we work in aerial training, we use the Lactate energy system, which is, don't forget that you can always comment and share this with your friends, and that you can always watch this anywhere else, not just on the podcast platform, but also on my YouTube channel. So make sure that you subscribe on that as well. All right, let's dive in. The Lactate energy system is a system that we use the most in aerial training. It's also called as anaerobic glycolysis system. It's a very big mouthful, but it is crucial for aerialists because it provides the energy needed for high intensity movements such as your invert, your pose, and your climbs and your strength hold. All right. With the Lactate system, when it's activated, the muscle need energy faster than oxygen can supply it. We have three types of energy system. We have the oxygen system, which means it's mostly for endurance that require a bit longer than 3-4 minutes. When you start kicking into your cardio for 10-15 minutes, you enter the oxygen system to supply your energy. So the energy burns. It's an oxygen, it's a combination of a chemical reaction of the oxygen that uses the glucose and burns it into an energy source. Again, I said we're not going to dive too deep, but with the Lactate system, it's really activated for the stuff that we do in aerial, which means sometimes it's under 90 seconds, but it can last up to about 4 minutes when you do a combo, right? But you're not going to hold the pose for longer than 90 seconds. However, you do a muscle contraction that sometimes will require a substantial amount of time, especially with your hands, so the grip. So it typically, during short bursts of intense exercise lasting up to about 90 seconds, it will break down stored carbohydrates, aka glycogen, into glucose, producing energy quickly. But the thing is, because you produce this energy fast, the system is more a situation where it needs the energy much faster than when you sustain an endurance. The issue that we have is it results in lactate, or if you know the common words, lactic acid, which is a byproduct. So it's a very different system where it's not a sustained use of the glucose. It's very quick. We need that glucose very fast, and therefore it creates this byproduct called lactic acid, and that's what gives you that burn, that fatigue, those little handshakes, and just general shake in your body as well. So that's lactic acid that can build up quite quickly, which is why also a beginner should take their time, make sure they take appropriate rest. I explained this in another episode. I discussed the Lactate system in more detail, where I explain everything into why you should take a certain amount of break in between and why. Have a look at that as well. So fueling the body with the right nutrients before training, it really is important to ensure that you have the adequate amount of glycogen to power you through session, but also through the whole intense aerial moves, and especially if you do new moves that require a bit more strength, you can sometimes prematurely fatigue yourself. I don't know if you've noticed sometimes, but if you learn something new in a class that's like an hour and a half, sometimes you fatigue after 45 minutes. So how to optimize this nutrition around your lactate system. So let's discuss the pre-training. Sometimes you don't always make the best food choices. I don't, because sometimes I know I'm teaching and I need to eat, and it's not always the right answer. However, you want your carbohydrates. So important. Don't cut carbs in your diet, especially when you do aero. It's really important. So since the lactate system relies on quick burst of carbohydrate energy, it's crucial to top your glycogen stores before training. Carbohydrates are broken down into your glucose, which is then used into anaerobic activities like aerial training. Luckily, carbohydrates tend to be the quickest of nutrients to be broken down in your system. It's kind of like you can always have it, depends on what kind of food you have, right? But it can break down quite quickly into your bloodstream and your system. So Big meals, generally, I would recommend, I say that, but sometimes I don't. I recommend 3 to 4 hours before your class, because a large meal, first of all, for your digestion, it might be a little bit difficult to digest fully, but also try and have it rich in complex carbohydrates, so those that take a little bit longer to come to be digested, such as brown rice, and have a lot of fiber like steam, like vegetables, just so your body processes it a little bit longer. And you can have then a small meal or snack 30 to 60 minutes before your class. Eating closer to your training session, you want to opt for more readily digestible foods, simple carbohydrates with a little bit of protein as well. Tend to avoid high fat or high fiber for this one, because that will slow down your digestion. This kind of nutrient take a lot longer for your system to process, and that might actually slow down even how your carbohydrates are processed. They makes what's called starch resistant. That's something, again, a bit more complicated. And then you can feel quite uncomfortable when you come to class and slightly sick. Some of us can feel quite sick. So I would recommend, for example, banana, almond butter, whole grain, even some toast and honey, anything that can be processed quite quick. I know, discussing dehydration, always hydrate, because it's efficient for your muscle function, avoiding cramping. You should be drinking water throughout the day. Obviously, everybody knows that. But you can also try and avoid drinking too much before class. Again, I'm not always the right person to give you advice on that, because I gulp a lot of water in one go myself. But you want to try and make sure that you don't feel too full of water. You can drink a little bit more before an hour before the class, and then during the class, you can obviously still drink, but drinking an hour before would prepare a little bit more your body. And you can also include an electrolyte drink if you're quite prone to sweating heavily during your training. Now, during your training, you can still have a snack, because your body still relies on the oxygen. Sometimes you might feel a blood sugar drop during your class. If your session is longer than an hour, I would consider having a small amount of easily digestible carbohydrate just to maintain your energy throughout. So the kind of snacks you can have is fruits, because they're easily digestible, sports drink, and you can have things that you can eat quite quick and that process quite quick. Obviously, stay hydrated as well. You don't have to be like me sometimes, be sploshing around because you like big gulps of water. But also additional electrolytes can also help with the energy and the hydration that you replace if you sweat quite a bit. Now, post-training, you need to make sure that you replenish your glycogen stores for your recoveries after an aerial training session that engages the lactate system. Generally, we will recommend a good meal, right? Post-training nutrition is where you really want to refill your glycogen store, you want to repair the muscle tissue that you've been using during your training, and you want to rehydrate adequately as well. You want to have in actual meals 30 to 60 minutes after training. It's the ideal window. Again, we're not saying everybody should and that you always need to do that, but it is the ideal window for you to replenish and kickstart your muscle recovery. So obviously protein and carbohydrate for this one. A nice blend of it, a 3-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein is recommended by nutrition professionals. Again, take everything as a grain of salt. I am not a nutrition professional myself. We do get a minimum of training, but do go to a dietitian if you want to have a bit more info on that, or if you want someone to design someone a bit more adapted to your needs. But what I like to do sometime after training during the day is have a smoothie with protein powder. This way I also hit my 3 to 5 fruits in one go, like berry spinach. You can put some oats, or you can have a proper meal. Very often the aerial classes will be quite late at night. It's a little bit difficult, but it is important to eat even after. I know it's hard, even sometimes I finish at 9 p.m. I don't want to eat, but I do feel like my body does require a little bit of food after doing such a strenuous kind of exercise. It is recommended to eat after class, to be honest. And obviously it is recommended to still stay hydrated post-training. It's quite important to drink water quite consistently, and you can also, again, have your electrolytes. I tend to, more in the summer than in the winter, I should probably do that more often, but I do tend to drink electrolytes either in the morning or before I go to bed. So that's just what I do as well. And I find that it does help. Why your nutrition matters when you use the lactate system so much is because you use a lot of energy in one go, and your body needs to adapt to that kind of training. Especially, I don't know, when you started aerial, but you can notice that you don't have the same kind of endurance or stamina. So you do need to feed your body in order for it to grow and in order for it to repair adequately and to adapt to the kind of training. And the better you eat, the more that lactate system, the more efficient that lactate system will become, and you will start seeing progress much faster as well. So it's important to understand how this system depletes the glycogen level really quickly, and without sufficient glycogen store, your performance will drop quickly. I don't know if you ever felt like hangry or quite cranky mid-class or at the end of the class, but that's quite normal if you haven't eaten adequately or properly before your class, or if your diet is a little bit crap, you'll probably feel a little bit tired when you come to class. So it is important to eat healthy and eating the right food, and try and plan it at the right time as well, like I've just discussed in previously. It's important for your recovery. It's important to stay healthy. Bear in mind that we do something that is quite demanding physically. So yes, let's feed our bodies quite well. Maximizing the energy. You will prioritize, obviously, making sure you get the right amount of carbohydrates before and after to boost your glycogen stores, staying hydrated, and consuming a balanced meal. Obviously, everybody know that balanced diet is key. So let's discuss a little bit about caffeine. That's one of the nutrients that I would say the majority of us use. I have had personal experiences regarding caffeine, and I'd love to hear yours. For me, caffeine can be really good, but also if I drink too much caffeine first, obviously I get the jitters, which is not great as someone who's already quite anxious. But the way it's impacted my performance in aero is particularly during the spins. And I've noticed that if I drink too much caffeine before training and then I go and spin, I feel very sick and nauseous. Now, there is a reason why spinning is quite particular in how we train, because there is a lot of proprioceptive and neuromuscular control that's required. Again, I've done another episode on that, proprioception and neuromuscular control, about this, how we manage this connection through mind and body using that body GPS instead of the vision. And therefore, caffeine, I think I felt, was impacting my proprioception. I wanted to make an episode where I actually looked at that, and I made a bit of research about this, but I had a theory and I wanted to double check. Caffeine is widely known, obviously, for the performance enhancing effect, increasing the alertness, delaying your fatigue. But for aerialists, especially if you work on your spins, caffeine stimulating properties can sometimes have a bit of unexpected impact, which is reduced spinning tolerance. And I've noticed that. I've noticed I tolerate less my spins when I have too much caffeine. So the reasoning behind it is that it stimulates your nervous system by blocking your adenosine receptors. Adenosine receptors are your receptors that work with your... Why have I forgotten the word? Circadian. That work with your circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm is when you wake up in the morning and you go to bed at night, and your adenosine receptors. So your circadian rhythm works with the daylight, right, mostly, but it also works with your adenosine receptors coming more towards the day, saying there is an amount of adenosine pressure that builds in your brain. And then towards the end of the day, that pressure just tells your body that we need to go to bed and relax. Caffeine blocks that. Caffeine also has very long life of up to 12 hours. So it's important to not drink caffeine too late in the day for that reason. But also because of blocking the adenosine receptor, it increases sensitivity to motion and it elevates your heart rate. Right? So that's what it does, right? We block the adenosine, we keep that energy, and we don't fatigue, but at the same time, everything else has to work extra hard to keep yourself awake. Therefore, you become a little bit more sensitivity in your motion as well. And the heightened state of alertness can worsen the feeling of dizziness and nausea during spinning sequences, as your vestibular system, yes, the one that controls your balance, aka your proprioception, may become overstimulated. That's actually a thing. Caffeine can make you less tolerant to spinning. In some cases, caffeine can even exacerbate your motion sickness, and it will make it harder to maintain the focus during your rapid or extended aerial spins. If you do notice that sometimes you are a bit intolerant to spins, do analyze if you have had caffeine, and that may be why. Obviously, for aerialists that are sensitive to spinning, or if you're just trying to learn, be aware that caffeine makes it worse. So limit your caffeine intake before your class, your performances, especially if you want to try spinning. Do try and not drink coffee before you come to a class. So obviously you can also try smaller doses and test out your tolerance to it, to try and see how it works with you. So in terms of obviously practical advice is to avoid large doses of caffeine, especially we tend to sometimes have energy drinks as well before classes. If you know that you are quite new to spinning, or if you want to work on your spins, and obviously like I said, you can also test your tolerance. And this is a very interesting subject because I really like coffee. Learn to not drink coffee past a certain time in the afternoon, because I have noticed that it does impact my sleep. But then I have noticed that it was impacting my tolerance to spinning. And I think I've wanted to figure it out for you and explain it to you as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how well you know your energy system for training, what kind of diet adjustments you might have done in your nutrition since you started training aerial. Are you feeling more hungry, less hungry? And what are your challenges as well coming as an approach in your training as well? For me, the challenge is timing my meals because I teach quite late and I'm hungry before, and it's very hard to time my meals with my aerial classes. I'd love to hear your opinion on that. Please do let me know by commenting on anywhere that you're watching or listening to this, but also you can always get in touch with me. And remember that I have created a platform online dedicated to sustainable training for aerialists. It's called the Aerial Performance Lab, and it is a platform where I design programs that have rehab, flexibility, strength conditioning for aerialists outside the classes mostly, to try and help you build a more sustainable way of training your favorite art form. But thank you for joining me on this lovely little podcast, this little episode. Please don't forget to share it far and wide to your fellow aerialist friends, because it's important that we empower ourselves in knowing our bodies better in order to train stronger. I will see you in the next episode. Bye. I also want to remind you that there is a treasure trove of free content that you can access and I create for you. First of all, with every episode, you will see there are show notes where you can access the block that relate to this episode. The block dives a little bit deeper into details and also provide added references for you, some extra reading and some science papers that have inspired those episodes and those blogs. Second of all, you can also check out my YouTube channel where you will find a lot of workouts and flexibility, conditioning, and strength exercises that are suited for aerialists in particular, but just not aerialists as well. And finally, don't forget to check out my app and the Aerialist Performance Lab. Thanks.